First, I just want to say thanks to the organizers and all the speakers. This has been a really, really fun conference for me, and I think for everybody here. Really great event. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about Facebook's production engineering role and why and how we onboard new grads into that role. Just a little bit about me real quick. My name is Espen Roth. I work on the real-time infrastructure team at Facebook. These are the three main services that my team has been working on for the past 2 years while I've been at the company. The first is push notifications, so a red dot. The second is the little green dot that tells you who's online. And the very last is a pub sub service that's responsible for all your live notifications when you're on the site and you don't have to refresh the page. That system's also used by Messenger and Instagram. So this is kind of what we're building, but we're also keeping that ship afloat. And one way we try to make that happen is through on-call shifts, which we've heard a lot about this whole week. And I want to start with a little story about my first on-call. So the week was going well. We do a 7-day shift for 24 hours for those 7 days for the team. So we started on Tuesday, and it got to Saturday, and nothing really bad had happened. So I figured nothing bad was going to happen, right? Great assumption to make when you're on call. And so I had my laptop on me, but I was actually at a rooftop bar in San Francisco with some of my friends. And eventually my phone rings, and I'm just dreading what's about to happen because I have not been on this team very long. I don't really know these services too well, and I just don't really know what's going on. So I log onto my laptop, I see these graphs, and they look bad. I mean, I don't know what they mean, but they look really bad. So I start pinging people on my team. I'm like, guys, help, somebody jump in. And eventually the right senior person came, got online, and handled it, and the situation was fine, But I just felt really wrong. I felt incapable, and I'm wondering if any of you remember back to the times when you were first getting into SRE, and you just felt like you didn't really belong, especially when you didn't know the systems. So I definitely had some imposter syndrome at that time, and we'll come back to this story a little bit. But I guess these are the two questions that I want to answer, okay? So the first is, how does Facebook successfully hire and onboard the people that we want to work with? And the second is, as a new grad, what can I do to take the reins and take control of my own experience and get what I need to do my own job? So here's a little bit about where this talk is going. We're going to talk about why new grads are actually pretty important to hire, how to interview them, good steps for onboarding, and then Facebook's entire production engineering role and organization, and how that fits in with this whole question. So a little bit more about me. Why can I answer these questions? I was actually hired at Facebook straight out of school. I wasn't an intern, and I had never worked at a big company like that before. I work almost exclusively on reliability, and like I said before, this stuff is used by Messenger, Facebook, and Instagram. On top of that, I've seen a 2x growth of my own team, so I've been a mentor to multiple people that have come on as well. Okay, so why are new grads important to hire? First, you can think of them as being diverse. Having young people that aren't the same age as everyone else on your team is actually pretty important because they're going to bring new ideas to the table. Not only that, they just spent 4 years learning the newest technology. So they haven't been building the services that you have been working on for the past time. They've actually been getting up to speed on what's out there today. They also know how to work with deadlines. When you get assignments in school, you're not just building and iterating on something over a long period of time. You have to finish something in time for it to be done and to get a grade. You also get specific knowledge. You pick your electives when you're in college, so you've actually got some pretty specific things that you've learned. And I think the next big point is that you're going to expand your network a lot. If you're hiring people from conferences and things like this, maybe they'll have teammates that are in their network, but if you pull out of a college, those kids just spent time with a bunch of other computer science students working on a bunch of different teams, not just the one team that they've been with for the past year. And lastly, I think we want to think about the long-term investment, not only in your company, but in the industry. When you bring these people up to speed and bring them on board and bring them to conferences like this, they're going to learn a lot and bring more to the table in the long term. So what's the problem here? Hiring new grads is actually pretty hard, and so is being one, especially when you're first getting into the space. I just want a show of hands. How many people graduated in the past 5 years from school? Okay, pretty good number. How many people here have hired someone out of college into an SRE role in the past 5 years? Okay, good number. So in some ways I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of room for improvement. So with that in mind, let's think about the difference between school and work. From school, like we already mentioned a little bit, you build a lot from scratch, where when you get into a job, you actually are maintaining these things over long periods of time. And like when I got there, all of this stuff was already built. We're just continuing to iterate on it, right? I'm not starting from the very base. And when I get there, I don't really know what's going on. In school, like we said already, you can choose your interest, where at a job, you're working more with a team. In school, you're working alone a lot. There's a few team projects and things like that, but you kind of get to do whatever you want in school in terms of like how you want to actually write your code as long as the thing gets done. Where at work, at a job, you're playing the long game, you're thinking way in the future, and you're working with other people. And lastly, I think it's important to think of why you want to do work in both of these places, because they're kind of different. In school, you're doing it for a grade, and the thing is done when it's done, where when you're at a job, this thing is going to last for a really long time, and you want to be thinking about, how is this going to look 1 or 2 years down the road when we have 10x traffic, all of that kind of stuff. So bridging the gap between these two ways of working is what's going to really enable us to effectively hire new grads. And with that, I want to get into the question of how to interview people. And before I get into what I mean by this diagram, I just want you guys to remember that your company is a living, breathing thing, and it stays that way because of the people that you hire, and the people that you hire become part of your company through this process that we're talking about. So we talk about this intersection of capability, passion, and opportunity. And the goal of interviewing is to determine the size of that middle region. That's going to be the sustained impact that these people have at your company. So these circles might look a little bit different depending on who is looking, but I just want to point out right now that it's not just the company's goal to see the size of that middle thing. As a new student or a new grad who's about to get into the workplace, I want to know that I'm going to be able to have that sustained impact too. So the circles might look different depending on who's looking and when you're looking, right? So if you don't know the person very well and you're just starting this whole interviewing process, it's probably going to be a little bit more like this. When you don't know much about their capabilities, passions, or opportunities, you have no idea what the intersection is going to look like. So I kind of just want to go over these 3 points. Capability first. From the company's perspective, you're really looking for base level technical skills. And when I say that, I really mean base level. You have to have this sort of bar, but you also need to remember that these kids have not been doing reliability work almost at all in school. Because once they've finished their project, that's it. They got a grade, right? And then it's over. You're really looking a lot more for the ability to learn and continue to develop ideas. And especially, I think the main way to learn that from them is how well they communicate, and if you can really just have a conversation about services and things, and how quickly these conversations can evolve during the interview. From a candidate's perspective, I think it's more important to think about how this place is going to push me to grow. Does this place have what it takes to make me grow as an engineer? I don't want to be the smartest person in the room of the company that I'm joining, okay? Especially as a new grad. I want to continue my growth experience, continue to learn. And with that, also, how many other new grads does this company have? Do I have people that I can grow with at the company, or am I going to be completely alone on that whole journey? From a passion perspective, what is the company looking for? What about computers is making this candidate tick? What's making them think that they actually want to join? Why did they get into computer science in the first place? And some questions you can ask for that is, what are some side projects they worked on? What is some stuff that they would love to work on but haven't looked yet? And ultimately, why are they even at this interview in the first place? From the candidate's perspective, I think it's more about looking at the core values of the company. Where is this going? Is this something that I can be passionate about, not just about the code that I'm writing, but about the impact that that code is going to have on the world? Same thing from that is also is this a project that I want to work on inside this company? And one way you could ask that if you're an interview candidate is what other projects have new grads working on? Yeah, maybe the company is doing some really awesome stuff, but I want to make sure they're not reserving that for their top engineers. I want to know that I can actually go work on that when I get hired tomorrow. For me, interviewing, this meant finding a role which had plenty of projects and not low-hanging fruit. I want to be able to come in and day out and get this stuff done. Lastly, I want to talk about opportunity. So the company is asking, would it be a pleasure to work with this person? And even so, maybe this candidate's going to evolve to be a manager someday. So would it be a pleasure to work for this person? That's something you need to ask yourself. And then as a candidate, if I'm thinking about the opportunity piece of this puzzle, what's the net benefit of me joining the company? Where do I see myself in 5 years? And what's that career path look like? Is there opportunity for me in the long run? Quick side note, I don't know how many of your guys' companies do internships, and so this can be kind of broad, this definition. What I'm talking about here is, like, in the summer, Facebook hires people for 3 months to get one single project done. And it really is the ultimate interview because these people get many sources of feedback and they have a really long time to be exposed to what the company is doing. And then if they're hired, if it's chosen that they are good enough, that they meet the bar, then there's almost no ramp up when they come back to work at the company full time. They've already learned all the tools and processes to get stuff done, and they can actually transfer that knowledge into the peers that are new grads that haven't been interns before. Not only that, they have connections now within the company that they can leverage once they come back. Okay, so let's say we hired someone. That's the end of the story, right? No, this is just the beginning. So, a lot of new grads don't realize that the work they do in school doesn't begin to cover the bases of SRE today. As new grads, we need to stay humble and alert and soak in as much possible. So, it's like going from maybe a really big fish in a small pond to going into the ocean and actually realizing that there's sharks there. So I think the things that we need to keep in mind here and the way to make these people humble and make them learn is to introduce them to your systems, your people, and your expectations. Mainly throwing these people into the fire in all three. So from systems, have them explore the code. Have them look, actually. You can encourage them to ask questions, and you can answer those questions with a question that makes them go look for the answer. You can give them a hint at where to look, maybe, but if you can avoid giving them the direct answer, you're actually teaching them to fish for the next time they have a similar question. As far as people goes, you want to introduce them to your top engineers. You want to introduce us to the people that are going to blow our minds, and that's going to keep us passionate about what we're doing. Also, managers and tech leads, one-on-ones, mentoring, it's all so important. We talk all about the systems, but there's not one server in this room. We're all people here. It's the same thing at your company. Like I said before, it's alive and breathing. So these relationships are really, really important. One-on-ones with managers, I think, is a really, really good way to get rid of imposter syndrome. And just keeping those meetings open and honest and saying, no, you actually do belong here. We hired you for a reason, and we believe that you have impact at this company. That is so important. And same thing with a tech lead, having someone who's actually knowledgeable about the technology and has been through this, because everybody at this company has been at a position before where they felt like they didn't belong or they didn't know what was going on. So lastly, expectations. We think you can grow. We know what you've seen so far, and you've got potential. Along with that, introducing them to the on-call role and what that means in terms of getting stuff done. There's never going to be a perfect time. You're never going to just go on call for the first time for one team and be able to do everything, but you are going to need to be a part of the on-call shift. So the only way to get that knowledge and that feeling is to actually do it. So again, throw us into the fire. It's very important. Okay, so I have a bit of a story here. This was my first project. I had thousands of machines, right? And they're all in these different groups. You can think of these as machine pools. And think of this as service N, X, Y, and Z that my team is managing. If we wanted to move capacity from one service to another, we would actually have to restart those hosts and rename them. And then we could restart the new software on there. Basically just moving machines between these pools. But that would take up to hours, depending on how long it took to reprovision these machines. So the project was actually to coalesce these all into one group. But to do that, I actually did have to do that process of restarting all the machines, reprovisioning them, and then moving them into this one new group that we could run all of our services on. That sounds like a pretty boring project, but it was actually really, really important and helped me grow so much because I learned all about, first of all, just what services my team was running, how they did what they do, what they're responsible for, what kind of hardware they ran on, allocation constraints. Maybe we didn't want machines in the same rack for the same service, or maybe we wanted, for a different service, all of the machines in one rack. So I had to learn about all of that, and I also had to learn about capacity readiness, about how we plan for new traffic coming in, how many machines we're gonna need for all of that, and things like that. So, you know, it seems like a very basic project, but it really was getting thrown into the fire to do all this. And I actually was able to restart all of our machines without causing any downtime or violations of any of our SLAs on my team. So that was pretty cool. Now I just want to talk a little bit about the production engineering role at Facebook and what it means. First off, I know I've been talking about it a lot, but I haven't really said. So production engineering is Facebook's take on the site reliability role. And what it really is trying to bridge the gap between SRE and software engineering. So what that means for us is that we are actually embedded on software engineering teams, not so that they can throw the code over the wall for us to keep running in prod, but so that we can teach them the best practices to ship their own stuff so that when bad things happen, they can be the ones to fix it. Because the people who write the code are the ones who are gonna know how to remediate these situations a lot better than just the people who know how many machines there are and all of that stuff. So this is kind of where I think the production engineering role comes from. So this is the same diagram as before, right? We have the capability of keeping the site up. That is our main job. We have the opportunity to work on massive systems, which is pretty cool, and we're really passionate about connecting the world. Production engineering came out of all of those three, and so the role itself, like I said, is half SRE and half software. We focus a lot on perf reliability and scalability. Not only that, we think a lot about the breadth of the services, how they're all interacting together, but also the depth of how these things work down to the hardware level, but also, as I said, about how these services interact with each other. We are embedded on suite teams, software teams. We share the on-call rotation. So my team has roughly 6 production engineers on it and 24 software engineers, and there's 30 people on this on-call rotation. We don't make any distinction between the two there. We also don't make distinctions between meetings or between the task lists that we end up with. I would say the one thing that's different is that the production engineers on our team are all about automating the operational workload that our team has to deal with. So that's my team. The day in and day out will look a lot different depending on which team you actually are embedded on, but I think this basically sums up probably 90% of the PE teams at Facebook. The production engineering organization. It's groups to share production-related news and questions and culture. We meet every year for what we call the Production Engineering Summit, which involves a lot of social events and a lot of talks like this, some more technical, some more social or human. And really, I think the idea that we get out of this is that we can teach a team to ship, and they can ship for a lifetime, right? So as soon as we're done having code thrown over the wall for us to work on, we can actually focus more on creating tools and services to help improve these services' reliability instead of just being the people who are starting the jobs up in containers, moving capacity around, things like that. It's also about cross-pollination because we care a lot about the reliability and the software teams care a lot about new features and stuff that they're going to ship. So we want to be able to get those ideas across both ways so that we can all have conversations and meetings together. And this production mindset takes a lot of time to get right, especially when you're trying to teach people who care mostly about features. And they have to take the time in the same way for us. So that said, that was the organization, right? So this is kind of my take on how I have dealt with this in the past year and a half. As an individual, I feel like more than anything else, I've just brought ideas and people together, whether that's in meetings or in code, to realize my own potential and make a lasting impact. So I want to go back to the story I said at the beginning, right? I had the senior engineer come, and he helped me debug and figure out what was the problem. But how did he do that? He actually had to log in to one host of our service read the logs and find a use case that was actually using our service incorrectly. And then he was able to, by that, he had to land a code change, which meant writing a pull request, basically, getting that approved, and then finally landing it. It took about 30 minutes. Maybe that's fine for some teams for remediation, but my team is actually called real-time infrastructure, and that's probably the least real-time thing I've ever heard of. So I actually built a tool that does this, and it's not just a web page. I actually had to go write service code to get this data out. And yeah, this graph is fake because they don't want us showing real data, but basically you can see here, this is maybe what the graph would have looked like for that night. So we have this blue use case that is using our system, our big pub subsystem, and it's taking a lot of traffic, or maybe it's a lot of errors or something. And basically, with this tool, not only can we see who is misusing our system, we actually have the ability to type in the use case into a box and kill switch or throttle that use case. So I did that for our team, and that was great. And then another team saw the tool and was like, oh man, I wish I had that. So after that, I built this super general version that anyone could use as long as they're using our configuration framework for their service. And then from there, we've had like 5 or 6 other teams adopting this for their service. So, it's like you can start with something, and then if you're going to make it again, you may as well make n+1, which I mean by that is like, you should make it in such a way that for the second time, it's the same exact code for the 8th or 9th or 20th time. You need this to be able to be reused and generalized for everyone and get other people to use it. Because once you've done that, you've actually multiplied the impact of writing your code, and it's more about just getting other people to use it. And at Facebook, we call that impact, which we care a lot about. So again, here's this diagram, right? I had the passion to make this tool easy, fast, and safe to use. I had the capability of writing service code to gather data, and I had done full-stack web development plenty of times in colleges and other internships. The opportunity I had was to write a new tool that my team was actually going to use, and so we call that a new project. Okay, so I'm getting close on time, so I just want to get some key points for you guys for hiring and onboarding, okay? For companies, the most important thing you can do when you're interviewing and onboarding is to find common ground with these people. That's really, really important, and as soon as you have something that you can share and talk about, you can start any conversation you need. Interview aggressively. You need to interview a lot. It's really important, and it does take a lot of time, but it is worth the investment because this defines and shapes the rest of your company. Mentor intentionally. Whether you're starting the relationships or people come to you to become their mentors, it's so important just to take the time and invest in the people that have already become a part of your company. And lastly, culture is the glue that brings these organizations together. Like I talked about with the production engineering summits and things like that, we need to be able to share ideas very openly, and we need to get those ideas flowing across the entire organization and through the entire company. From a new grad's perspective, also, the most important thing is to find common ground. So there's your common ground right there. At least you can start there and make it bigger. Learn from a mentor. Like I said, it's super important. And if you need to be the first person to reach out, then do that. Automate everything. If you're doing the same thing a year from now that you're doing today, then you're probably not doing your job correctly. You should be automating your job away. Stay uncomfortable, which is kind of similar. You don't want to be doing the same thing the whole time. Embody the culture. Step into those ideas that are going around. And finally, stand on the shoulders of giants. The technology you're building and using is something the rest of the world has never seen before. So take advantage of what people before you have built and the people that you're working with have built, and you'll do things that nobody has ever seen in the world. So that's all I have for you. Thank you guys for the time.